Okay, thank you for tuning in for this. It's going to take about 30 to 40 minutes according to my scripting, so feel free to pause and come back if you don't have the full time. On August 11th, I fell 20 feet from a telephone pole. I was working doing cable line work, the kind of job where you're up in the air for more than you're on the ground. One second I was doing my job, next second I wasn't in control of anything anymore. I don't remember the fall. I don't remember hitting the ground. What I know because other people told me later. I know the paramedics who got me that day didn't think I'd make it to the hospital. I know the doctors who worked on me that night told my family to prepare for the worst. That survival wasn't the expectation, it was the exception. I'm going to tell you what happened after that sentence. He probably won't survive. Because that sentence was not the end of my story. It was the first sentence of it. 5 years later, in 2015, I got on a bicycle in New Jersey, and I did not get off until I was standing in Ghirardelli Square, San Francisco, watching my wife walk toward me. This is a story of everything that happened in between, and fair warning, the story involves a runaway zebra in Iowa, so stick around. I promise you, whatever you're standing in front of right now, whatever sentence someone has said to you that sounded like a life sentence, there's something in this story for you. Let me back up because you need to understand who I was before August 11th, 2010, to understand what was actually lost and what it actually took to get it back. I was not a cautious person. I want to be honest about that because there are a lot of people out there that build these speeches like they were careful, sensible people that tragedy struck out of nowhere. And that's not me. Not at all. I was a skydiver. I jumped from airplanes on purpose, paid money to do it, and would do it again tomorrow if you let me. I was a scuba diver. I went under water where humans aren't built to breathe because I wanted to see what was down there. I rode motorcycles, two wheels, no cage, just me and the road, and whatever decisions I made in that moment. And, of course, I rode bicycles. Long before any of this, cycling was already part of who I was. Balance, motion, the feeling of covering ground under your own power. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand balance was not new to me. Risk was not new to me. My body knew how to do these things instinctively without thinking about it. That's important. Hold on to that because in a few minutes I'm going to tell you what it's like to lose something your body has always just known how to do and have to learn it again from zero. But before any of that, before the skydiving, before the scuba, before I ever got a bicycle for the first time, there was my mother. My mom was a teacher, and not the kind of teacher who lets you slide. She raised me on one rule that I did not appreciate nearly enough as a kid, and appreciate enormously more now. You do not quit. Not try not to quit. Not quit if it's really hard. Very simply, you do not quit. She was so good at keeping people, kids, adults, whoever was in front of her, on task and moving forward that eventually the United States government noticed. My mother went to work at the Naval War College. Let that sink in. National War College, sorry. Let that sink in for a second. This is a woman whose classroom management skills were apparently good enough for the Pentagon. She trained generals. Meanwhile, I needed a horse to teach me how to sit up straight. I think it's safe to say discipline runs in the family, even if it skipped a generation in the balance department. But, in all seriousness, everything I'm about to tell you, every mile of that ride, every session on that horse, every time I got back up, that all traces back to the lesson I learned in the kitchen table long before any of this happened. You do not quit. My mother didn't just teach me that, she was that every day of my life, and she still is. So on August 11, 2010, in Teaneck, New Jersey, I was up on a telephone pole doing cable work, a job I had done 100 times before. Heights didn't scare me, I told you. I jumped out of planes for fun. 20 feet doesn't sound like much when I say it out loud, 20 feet. That's not the top of a skyscraper. But the human body was not built for the eventual hit to the ground at the speed gravity gives you from 20 feet up, and mine didn't handle it well. I sustained a traumatic brain injury, a TBI. Those three letters are going to come up a lot for the rest of this talk, so let them sit for a second. As a traumatic brain injury isn't like breaking your arm, you can't put a cast on it. You can't see it on the outside. The organ that makes you, you, that runs your balance, your speech, your memory, your personality, your ability to walk across a room, that organ got shaken and damaged in a way that doctors could not promise I'd recover from. When my family got to the hospital, the doctors did not sugarcoat it. They said I probably would not survive the night. Think about that phrase for a second. Probably would not survive. Somewhere in a hospital in New Jersey, there's a chart or conversation or memory in my family's mind where a medical professional, someone trained to know these things, looked at my situation and calculated that death was the more likely outcome. I did not get a vote in that moment. Nobody does. You don't get to raise your hand and say, actually, I've got plans. Survival in that moment was not up to me. But I survived the night, and then I survived the next thing. And after that, another thing. Here's what people don't understand about surviving something like this. Surviving is not the finish line. Surviving is the starting gun for a completely different race, one nobody trains you for. I lived. That's the miracle everyone talks about. But living with a traumatic brain injury meant I had to relearn things that a 5-year-old does without thinking. I told you earlier, before the accident, my body just knew how to balance. On a bike, on a surfboard, jumping out of a plane and landing on my feet, balance was just automatic. And after the accident, it wasn't automatic anymore. My brain, the part responsible for coordinating my body in space, had been injured. And one of the first things I tried to do was get back on my bicycle, because that's who I was before. I got on, I fell immediately. Got on again, and I fell immediately again. My body simply did not have the balance anymore, and no amount of willpower was putting it back by force. So we tried something different. My path back to balance did not start on a bicycle at all. It started on a horse. I got into therapeutic horseback riding, and if you've never heard of it, it's exactly what it sounds like. Using time on a horse, guided and supported, to help rebuild the kind of core balance and coordination that the brain injury can take away. Sounds almost too simple to work. A horse just walking and a person trying to stay centered on top. But that rhythm, the slow, steady motion of a horse underneath you, forcing your core and inner ear and your brain to constantly renegotiate how they stay upright, turned out to be exactly what my nervous system needed to relearn. I want you to sit with that irony for a second, because it's not lost on me. Before the accident, I was a cyclist. Balance was in my body. After the accident, the same body couldn't find it again on a bicycle. I had to find it back on a horse. Something almost poetic about that, if you ask me. I didn't relearn balance by white-knuckling my way through the exact same task that used to come naturally. I relearned it somewhere completely unexpected. On an animal, at a walking pace, with people around me who were patient enough to let my brain figure it out on its own. Session by session, that horse rebuilt something in me that no amount of falling off a bicycle ever could. My core got stronger, my brain and body started talking to each other again, and slowly, the balance I'd relearned on the horse started transferring back to where I first tried and failed, a bicycle. I got back on that bike, and this time it held. The lesson underneath all that, and I didn't see it until much later, is that the straight line back to what you lost is not always the fastest. Sometimes you have to relearn the thing sideways on completely different ground before you're ready to reclaim the thing you actually wanted. I didn't get my bicycle back by fighting harder with a bicycle. I got it back by trusting a horse. So once again I could ride. Really ride. Not just wobble down the driveway. I had a choice to make. I could treat that as the victory. Balance recovered. Chapter closed. Move on with my life. Or I could ask the bigger question. If I can do this, what else can I do? I decided I wanted to ride my bicycle across the United States, not around the block, not a nice trail near my house, from New Jersey to California. Thousands of miles, dozens of states, mountains, deserts, weather I couldn't control, terrain I'd never seen. I want to be honest with you. This wasn't just about proving something to the world. It was about proving something to myself and to the doctor's sentence from 5 years earlier. Somewhere in me, I needed to answer the word probably with action, not an argument. Doctors told me told my family, I'm sorry, I probably wouldn't survive. My own body told me for a while that I couldn't get balance on a bike again. I had already proven probably wrong twice. I want to see how far probably wrong could take me. I want to take you across the country with me because the ride itself taught me things the recovery never could. In Pennsylvania and the early miles, the trip did not start easy. I hit mountains and ice early on, brutal climbing, cold that got into my joints, the kind of thing that starts to make you question the whole plan in the first week. I remember stopping at the Crayola factory and getting on a video call with my wife's first grade class because even the hardest early miles, there was something worth sharing with kids who were watching a grown man do something hard on purpose. Then came Ohio, Illinois, and Iowa. The middle of the country doesn't get talked about enough in stories like this, but it should, because it's where the romance of the idea wears off and the real grind sets in. Headwinds in Iowa that made every mile feel like two. And then Iowa gave me a zebra. I want you to picture it. I'm hundreds of miles into this ride. I've been staring at corn for what feels like several presidential administrations. My legs are done negotiating with me, and somewhere in the middle of Iowa, I look up, and there's a zebra, standing in a field next to what I can only assume were extremely confused cows, who did not sign up to share the pasture with a large striped horse from a completely different continent. Now, I don't know the zebra's story. I don't know if it escaped from a farm, a sanctuary, or a very ambitious petting zoo. What I do know is that it had been pedaling. What I do know is that I had been pedaling through hour after hour of flat, quiet, nothing happening farmland, half convinced my brain was playing tricks on me because if you've had a traumatic brain injury, am I seeing this correctly, is a question you get used to asking. But no, it was real life zebra in Iowa, just out there, living its best life, several thousands of miles from where a zebra is supposed to be. And here's the thing, I related to that zebra more than I expected to. That zebra was somewhere it wasn't supposed to be, doing something nobody expected of it, and looking completely fine with that. Meanwhile, there's a guy on a bicycle who was told he probably wouldn't survive a fall, told his balance wouldn't come back, now pedaling across the entire country on a route that wasn't the plan doctors had for him either. The zebra and I had more in common than either of us had with the cows. So if you ever need permission to be the unexpected animal in somebody else's field, that zebra gave it to me in Iowa, and I'm passing it on to you for free. After that, it was back to business. Flooding changed my route with no warning because Iowa apparently wanted to test both my sense of direction and my sense of reality at the same week. Nebraska came along, flat, endless, more cattle than people. The kind of landscape that puts you alone with your own thoughts for hours at a time. I passed so many cows in Nebraska that I started narrating my own ride like a nature documentary. Here we see a traumatic brain injury survivor migrating slowly westward, occasionally mooed at by locals. That's where the ride like this stops being about your legs and starts being about your mind. Also, apparently your ability to make cow jokes to keep yourself sane for 6 hours. I entered Colorado after this. And I want to tell you about the mile where I almost stopped being able to finish it. Wasn't a mountain I saw coming. It wasn't weather. My original plan had me following Interstate 80 through Wyoming. Circumstances forced me to reroute around Wyoming entirely, so I sent myself through Colorado instead. And Colorado is where my own body told me it couldn't go higher. The elevation was putting pressure where I have hardware in my head from the original injury, and for a few weeks, sitting on the side of the road somewhere outside Denver, I wasn't thinking about finishing the bike ride across the country. I was thinking about the fact that the same brain injury that almost killed me once, 5 years later, was drawing a hard line I couldn't argue with. That's a different kind of scare than falling off a bike learning to balance. That's your body reminding you to it still keeps the receipts. For a few minutes sitting there, I let myself consider it, that maybe this was the wall, not a metaphorical one, an actual medical, your brain will not negotiate with this wall. And I want to be honest with you. It's strange, lonely thing to almost quit, not because you're weak, but because the smart thing is quitting, looking identical from the side of a Colorado highway. What got me moving again wasn't stubbornness. It was the same rules from the kitchen table years earlier. You do not quit. You find your next right move. So I didn't push through the wall. I went around it. I cut Denver short. I adjusted the route again. The ride kept going. I stopped insisting it had to go the way I planned. I want to pause on that moment because it matters more than the mile markers. Changing the plan is not the same as quitting the plan. I did not abandon the ride. I adapted it. There's a lesson in there for anybody in this room facing a wall they didn't expect. The goal doesn't always require the exact route you first imagined. Sometimes strength looks like stubbornness. Sometimes strength looks like a smart detour. When I entered Utah, here the ride turned into something bigger than me. I did TV interviews, local news picked up the story, I spoke to school kids about helmet safety because it's one of the pieces of equipment that had everything to do with whether I'm standing in front of you today. It's a helmet. I didn't want to just finish the bike ride. I wanted every mile to mean something to somebody else too. So I come along Nevada, and not every mile of this journey is done completely alone. For a stretch in Nevada, I had support along the way. I remember the salt flats, a strange story involving a person and an apple that still makes me laugh. A sketchy moment in a tunnel next to an 18-wheeler that reminded me how much of this was still genuinely dangerous. And because you have to let yourself have fun in the mission or a mission like this, a stop in Tahoe, I played a little blackjack. Didn't win. But then came California. And finally, the last state. The one I'd been picturing since New Jersey. On June 29th, 2015, I rode my bicycle across the Golden Gate Bridge. I want you to picture that bridge. The fog, the cables, the water underneath. The whole thing feeling less like a road and more like a monument. And once I was across it, I rode to San Francisco to Ghirardelli Square where my wife was waiting for me. 5 years earlier, doctors weren't sure I'd survive the night. Sometime after that, my own body couldn't find its own balance until a horse taught it how, one patient step at a time. And on that day, I rode a bicycle across one of the most famous bridges on earth, from one coast of the country to the other, under my power, and my wife standing there at Ghirardelli Square to finish it off. I'm not going to pretend I have the words for what a moment like this feels like, because some moments are bigger than language. What I can tell you is this. It wasn't just a finish line for a bike ride. It was a finish line for a 5-year argument with the word probably. And there was chocolate nearby, which, frankly, felt a little earned. So, I didn't come here today just to tell you about a bike ride. I came here to tell you about what the bike ride taught me. Because I think that applies to whatever wall is in front of you right now. And I promise you, everybody in this room has one. First thing, a diagnosis is not a destiny. When people tell you what probably is going to happen, doctors, statics, or other people's opinion of your situation, probably is not the same as certainly. I spent my life proving the difference between those words. Second, recovery rarely happens on the ground you expect. Nobody claps for you during the unglamorous part. For me, that quiet session on the back of a horse with no guarantee any of it would transfer to anything. I didn't get my balance back by fighting the same fight over and over on a bicycle. Got it back somewhere sideways. Somewhere I would never have picked myself. The real work almost never happens where you think it will. And then third, when the plan breaks apart, don't quit. Don't wait for the herd's permission. Colorado taught me the first half of that. I couldn't take the route I planned, so I found another one. The goal survived, even though the plan didn't. And that zebra in Iowa taught me the second half. It didn't check with the cows before deciding to exist somewhere unexpected. If you're waiting for everyone around you to agree your comeback makes sense before you attempt it, you'll be standing in that pasture a long time. Ask yourself right now, is there a plan you are clinging to that's actually smaller than the goal underneath it? So, fourth here, and this is really the big one, balance can be rebuilt. And it means more than when it lifts someone else too. I mean balance literally, because I had to relearn it with my own body. But I mean it about everything. Your health, your confidence, your sense of who you are. It's not gone forever just because it's gone right now. And the moments that mattered most on this ride weren't the miles. They were the classrooms in Utah, the kids back on that video call in Pennsylvania. Whatever you're rebuilding, someone else needs to see you do it. Your comeback, shared honestly, is somebody else's permission to start their own. I started this talk by telling you about 2010. Doctors told my family I probably wouldn't survive the night. I want to end it by telling you what I've learned probably actually means. It doesn't mean impossible. It means unlikely, according to the information available right now. And information changes, circumstances change, people change. I was a skydiver, a scuba diver, a cyclist, a motorcyclist, somebody who lived on the edge of what was possible. A 20-foot fall took a lot of that away from me in an instant. But it didn't take away the part of me that gets back on the bike. Whatever your 20 feet is, whatever knocked you down, whatever sentence somebody said to you that sounded final, I want you to remember something. I didn't get my balance back by fighting the exact fight over and over. Got it back on the back of a horse. One patient session at a time, in a place I never expected to find it. And once I found it, I brought it home to the bicycle. And then I got back every single time. That's it. That's the whole secret. Nothing superhuman. Just get back on. Don't quit. My mother taught me that rule in the kitchen table decades before I ever needed it on a bicycle in Iowa. Turns out the woman who was good enough to keep the Pentagon on task was more than good enough to keep me on mine. I rode from New Jersey to Ghirardelli Square simply because I refused to let probably not be the last thing anybody would say about my life. What are you refusing to let be the last thing said about yours? And hey, if you forget something, everything else I said today, just remember, don't be a cow standing in a pasture waiting for permission. Be the zebra. Find your motivation. And on that, I'll see myself out. Thank you.